Okay, we are doing this program today because we've had a lot of people asking us what our take is on Syria. And as usual, our research has led us to a lot of different theories, a lot of different ideas that we've found inside of researching the evidence surrounding Syria. And a lot of the things that we're coming up with are a lot different than the stuff that most people are getting from the mainstream media, be it Fox News, CNN, whatever it is that is being pumped out of the televisions and in the newspapers as far as the reasoning for the United States to go in and start bombing Syria. Now, a lot of it starts, obviously, what the media is putting out with the attack or chemical attack that took place over in Syria. And over here, all you hear about is how the Assad regime is being blamed for this chemical attack, even though we haven't got any evidence or they haven't shown us any evidence. They claim that they have this evidence, but they haven't given us the evidence to view for ourselves that Assad and the Assad regime was directly responsible for this chemical attack that killed anywhere from 350 to 1,400 people. Now, when you look at different sources from around the globe, depending on what you're looking at, they're all saying different things. There are some sources coming out, I believe it was Israeli intelligence. Israeli intelligence told the United States that they intercepted all kinds of communications coming out of Syria, that they were responsible for this attack. Now, on the other end of that, you have German intelligence coming out saying they had a boat that was sitting out in the Mediterranean that was listening to conversations between Assad and the military, and they claim that their intelligence says that he had nothing to do with it. So then you get into this, okay, what is the reasoning for everybody fighting about Syria right now? Everybody knows that there's these rebels in Syria, and the rebels are attempting to overthrow Assad, and our media is using that as the catalyst. That is the reason why Assad would use sarin gas to take out these rebels. First, I want to look at who are these rebels? Where are they being funded from? Now, there's been a lot of reports showing that the United States obviously supports the rebels, and a lot of our allies do as well. One of our biggest allies, which is Saudi Arabia, they've come out and said that they support a faction of this rebel force. And I say a faction because there's a few different groups that are in Syria right now that are taking claim to this rebel force. The group that is being supported by Saudi Arabia is a group called al-Nusra. And if I'm pronouncing that correctly, it's al-Nusra. Saudi Arabia is hoping that by supporting al-Nusra, when the regime is toppled, Saudi Arabia is going to have a stake in the new Syrian regime. And what does that bode for Saudi Arabia? How does that benefit them? Well, there was just a very large gas pipeline. A gas reserve that was just found off the coast of Israel. And this gas pipeline is the largest, gas reserve. This gas reserve is the largest gas reserve found on the planet in the last 10 years. So it's a pretty big deal. Israel right now is taking claim to this gas pipeline that's off their coast. And this reserve, which Israel is currently exploring, the reserve is actually so big that it is off the coast of Lebanon as well, and it goes all the way up into, you guessed it, Syria. So Israel definitely has a stake in getting rid of the Assad regime, hoping to install a much friendlier regime that's going to allow for them to take whatever gas they want out of this reserve. Lebanon is also in a fight with Israel right now over the rights to this gas, where it's off the coast of Lebanon as well. And Lebanon is taking claim to a percentage of these reserves, as well as Syria will have claim to a percentage of these reserves based on the UN's resolution on waters, the seas. Now, first you have this gas that was found out there, okay? And Syria, for those that don't know, Syria is in a very strategic location. You see, there's already a gas pipeline that runs through Syria. By pipeline, I mean it's gas that was found someplace else, and it's being pumped through all the way up to Syria. And the place that this gas was found was in Egypt. For those of you that have been following the news, Egypt's government was just overthrown recently. And the government that, or the embodiment that overthrew Egypt was funded by two entities. One entity was Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia funded the army that overthrew the regime in Egypt. Now, the other faction of the rebels in Egypt, when Egypt was overthrown, was being funded by Qatar. Qatar is this little country that's attached to Saudi Arabia. It's surrounded on all sides by the Persian Gulf, with the exception of one side where it links onto Saudi Arabia. Now, the thing about Qatar is that Qatar sits on one of the largest gas reserves in the world. And they share this because of the waters. They share this with another country that's just across the water from them, which is Iran. Well, Qatar had much interest in Egypt because Qatar wants to start exporting a lot more of their gas. You see, they stand to make a considerable amount of money exporting gas to other countries. So what they have planned is they want to run a pipeline through Saudi Arabia, up through Jordan, through Iraq, and over to Syria. And they want to connect into this Pan-Arabian pipeline that already comes up from Egypt. Now, Egypt was supplying a lot of the natural gas. Their pipeline went around Israel and up through Jordan into Lebanon and then into Syria. Now, this pipeline also delivered natural gas to Israel until Israel just discovered that they have their own natural gas. So this area in Egypt was very desirable to Qatar. So these uprisings that started over in Egypt, one was funded by Saudi Arabia, and two was funded by Qatar. You see, Qatar funds the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood, for those of you that know, is the faction that took over Egypt. So with Qatar now having control of the pipeline that feeds gas all the way up to Syria, when Qatar approached Assad, this is before all of this happened. When Qatar approached Assad, before all the rebels and everybody started fighting over in Syria, Qatar had approached Assad to run his pipeline through there to deliver it to a pipeline in Europe. Assad said no. And there's a reason why Assad said no, and it's also the reason why Russia is protecting them. You see, Russia has a strategic alliance with Iran and Syria, And also, they have strategic alliances with some of these other Asian countries or Eurasian countries like Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. And the reason for this is because of natural gas. You see, Russia right now is one of the largest providers of natural gas to a particular region in the world that consumes a ton of it. That region is Europe. Russia runs all their natural gas pipelines from Siberia all the way through. Originally, all the pipelines came through Ukraine and then delivered natural gas all throughout Europe through that pipeline. Then there were some disputes with Ukraine, so Russia created an alliance with Belarus just to the north and ran a new pipeline that came through Belarus just in case there were any more disputes with Ukraine. They could continue sending natural gas over to Europe. Now, they have this control in Europe because of this natural gas. You see, Europe is extremely dependent on their natural gas. There are several countries over there that are 100% dependent on Russian energy. And several of the other countries that are still very much dependent. Without the Russian energy, their countries might not be able to function. So how does this play into what's going on in Syria? Well, you see, the Europeans wanted to get rid of this dependence on Russian energy. So what they did is a lot of them got together and started funding a new pipeline. And this pipeline was built. It was built, the idea for it started in 2002. Yes, coincidentally the same year that we went into Iraq to take over that regime. Now, does that play into this? I think so. I think Afghanistan also does, since Afghanistan is on the other side of Iran, and if Iran were ever to be toppled, we would be able to run a gas pipeline all the way across. You see, Iran is in a strategic location between the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf, and they control all the landmass through there. So nothing can go through to get from one end of the Middle East to the other end of Asia without going through Iran or Russia. So where they have control of this gateway going over to one country in particular, going to China, which is the new emerging market for natural gas, where they control this, they essentially control who is going to deliver all this natural gas to China, and they also control who is going to deliver natural gas to Europe. So Europe got together, and in 2002, they decided to build a new pipeline. And this pipeline was built starting from Austria, went down into Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, down into Turkey, and in Turkey, it stopped. And it was supposed to connect up into Georgia. Yes, Georgia, the country that Russia invaded a few years ago. Was it over this pipeline? Maybe. I wouldn't doubt it. But the pipeline that came from Turkey was supposed to go up into Georgia and then down into another country called Azerbaijan. Now, the thing about Azerbaijan is also a producer of natural gas. And they wanted to, when the countries in Europe built this pipeline, it's called the Nabucco pipeline, when they built this pipeline, they wanted to find takers to hook into this pipeline as a means of having a competition. Everybody knows that competition is great for the consumer because it creates price wars. And they're hoping that it brings the price of gas down. Now, the price of gas in a lot of countries that produce gas is directly linked to the price of oil. But with the competition that they would be able to create from these other countries, they're hoping that it would bring the price of gas down, and they wouldn't have to be completely reliant on Russia for their energy. Now, the fact that they're completely reliant on Russia for their energy also bodes politically, because if they don't vote in a certain manner, or they disagree with something on Russia, and Russia really wants them to vote a certain way, Russia could definitely punish these European nations by cutting down their supplies of natural gas, or creating disruptions in it. So you can understand how all of this goes in politically, and how dangerous this can be with the Russian influence in European politics, not to mention the bribes. Russia's main company for all of this energy is a company called Gazprom. And Gazprom is busy bribing a lot of these politicians in these European countries, so that when they're out of politics, they wind up with these nice cushy positions on boards of these subsidiary companies to Gazprom. So essentially, it's a payment. It's a payment for allowing Russian gas through there, and only Russian gas. It's a payment for them signing contracts that extend out to 2025 or 2030. And so that no competition, nobody can challenge the Russian gas that's going out to Europe. In all of Europe, 40% of Europe's energy is delivered via Russia. So what does Syria have to do with this? Well, you see, there's a country, Qatar, again, that wants to run their pipeline through Saudi Arabia, through Iraq, through Jordan, and into Syria. And when Assad told them that they couldn't do that, obviously there was one area that they wanted to go to next, and they were hoping that by controlling the Pan-Arabian pipeline and then connecting into that, they would then bring that pipeline up into Turkey. And they wanted to connect that pipeline up to the Nabucco pipeline. And the Nabucco pipeline gives Qatar 100% access to Europe. So now Qatar can become a supplier, in competition to Russia, a supplier of energy to Europe. Now, Saudi Arabia wants on board because of the pipeline, or I keep calling it a pipeline, but the gas reserves that were just found off the coast of Syria. Because Saudi Arabia, by funding al-Nusra, they're hoping that when the Assad regime is toppled, their financial support is going to help to create a new government in Syria that will be supportive of and controlled by Saudi Arabia. And that means Syrian gas, and control also paybacks for the pipeline running through. It's like a tariff for the pipeline running through Syria and up into Turkey to deliver gas to Europe. Now, Russia knows all about this, and the percentage that we're talking about that this will dig into Russia's profits, these pipelines are looking to take out 20% of what Russia delivers to Europe, and that's just the start. So China, also knowing that if Russia loses out on this, it could drive up their price. If Russia's economy is dependent on a certain amount of money coming in from Gazprom, where do you think that money's going to be made up? On the other end, with the gas deals with China. Now, China and Russia have been in talks about a gas deal for about a decade. And it's funny because just this week they signed the gas deal. And I'm thinking China was scared into signing the gas deal with the threats of the United States about to attack Syria. And if this pipeline was able to run through Syria and have it controlled by U.S. and their allies, edging Russia out of this game, then the prices that China are receiving would wind up going up. Now, the United States, in order for China to get better prices, if Syria was toppled, the U.S. would have to turn their sights, the U.S. and their allies, being Saudi Arabia and Qatar, would then have to turn their sights on Iran. And if they turn their sights on Iran, they would then be able to, if they were able to attack and overthrow Iran. On the other side of Iran, on one side you have Iraq, and on the other side you have Afghanistan, a country that we already took control of. We went in there, we installed our government, a government that is friendly to the United States. Now, if we were able to take out Iran, that would take out the land block between the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf. And we would be able to run this gas from one end through Turkey all the way up into Europe, and then straight through, down through Iran, through Afghanistan. And Afghanistan has this little piece of land that stretches between the other countries over there and borders China. So my theory on this is that Iran, after Syria, Iran would be next, so that this pipeline could be run. And you know there's been rhetoric on Iran since we went into Iraq. And it's all the same stuff, weapons of mass destruction. Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, so we had to go in there, right? And what happened? No weapons of mass destruction, yet we went in and installed a regime in Iraq. Now it's weapons of mass destruction in Syria, and chemical weapons are being used, so we have to go and take out this regime. And we've already heard the rhetoric on Iran, weapons of mass destruction, they're developing nuclear weapons, so we have to go in, we're going to have to go in and take out the regime in Iran. And then when all those regimes are overthrown, just like Afghanistan was, using 9/11 as the catalyst, we'll have a clear corridor to bring natural gas from one end of Europe to the other end of China, effectively taking Russia and their control, their monopoly on natural gas out of the picture. Now, we have a lot of other things that are going on that goes along with this entire idea. You see, Russia had created this thing called the Eurasian Union. It was an economic region with Belarus and Kazakhstan, and it was to divert gas through the Russian pipeline instead of proposed southern Euro routes. This is the instead of the Nabucco, there were a few countries that decided that Azerbaijan should send a shorter route instead of going up into from Turkey, going up into Bulgaria, into Romania, and then over into Hungary and Austria. They proposed a much shorter route going through the waters in the Mediterranean over to Italy. And that shorter route would cost them a lot less money to deliver the same gas from Azerbaijan over to Europe. And the funny thing about that is one of the countries that's involved in developing that pipeline is France. Do you find it funny that France is one of the people that's beating the war drums to go into Syria, saying that we support the United States to go in and topple the Assad regime? Of course they do, because they don't want any competition. They don't want anybody to be able to block them from bringing this gas to Europe. France's company Total, along with Azerbaijan's company Sokar, Britain's company BP and a company out of Norway called Statoil, or State Oil. I believe it's Statoil. But those are the companies / countries that stand to gain from this TAP pipeline running through Turkey into Italy. So when you see all of these people saying, yes, we support the United States, we support the White House's decision to go into Syria, understand that most of these decisions by these countries are financial decisions based on the survival of their economies. And it's all based right now on the explosion of natural gas from the Middle East, Iran, in particular Qatar, who's attempting to make their play for control of Syria as well. And just a side note, but the two rebel factions that are the two main rebel factions that make up the rebel force in Syria are funded by the same rebel forces that made up the same two countries, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, that overthrew Egypt. Saudi Arabia and Qatar teamed up and funded this Egyptian overthrow, and now they're teaming up once again, and they're funding all the rebels in Syria. Saudi Arabia funding al-Nusra, okay? The al-Nusra, in case you didn't know, is a branch of Al-Qaeda. Yes, Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is a group of the rebels. These are the people that the United States is supporting. Now, I thought Al-Qaeda was our enemy. I thought all this money that we're spending on these wars out here was to take out Al-Qaeda. But I guess I was wrong. You see, Al-Qaeda is now doing the bidding for allies, our allies. So Al-Qaeda is now taking money from Saudi Arabia to go into Syria and overthrow the regime there. And do you find it a coincidence that recently from Abu Ghraib, most of you remember what happened in Abu Ghraib, but the Abu Ghraib prison, 600 high-level Al-Qaeda operatives were able to escape from that prison after a prison break, and we have no idea where they went. Oh, sure we do. They went over to fight in Syria. Was it a prison break, or did we let them out? Do you see what's happening here? It's all over natural gas. The other faction over in Syria, the other rebel faction, is a group called the Muslim Brotherhood. Sounds familiar. It sounds a lot like Egypt. The overthrow that happened in Egypt. Egypt, the other gas supplier. Now, of course, Israel is going to support this. Of course, Saudi Arabia is going to support this. And, of course, Qatar is going to support this. But now let's take a look at the makeup of Syria, where you have the Assad regime and you have these two main rebel factions trying to overthrow the regime with the help of the United States. And obviously the Assad regime is getting plenty of help from Iran, who's sending thousands of troops over there. Russia, who's sending tens of thousands of troops in. They sent missile cruisers over there. China now sending troops and boats over to protect Syria. Now, my question to you is, it has to come back to now all of the rhetoric that's being pumped out to the U.S. media. And that's over these chemical weapons that were used outside of Damascus, because we still have to talk about that. Did Assad use chemical weapons on the rebels? Well, I seem to recall a quote by Barack Obama back on August 20th, 2012, his remarks to a reporter when he was asked about military intervention in Syria. This was in 2012. He says, "We have been very clear to the Assad regime, but also to other players on the ground, that a red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. That would change my equation. So I have to ask, with Assad knowing that, if he uses chemical weapons, the United States is going to come in there, and with Russia having such interest in the Assad regime, and Russia telling the Assad regime, do not use chemical weapons or you won't have our backing, do you really think that Assad would go through and use chemical weapons? He already has the backing of Russia. So then we know, obviously, I'm not saying that the chemical weapons were not used. What I am saying is that they were used by the rebels against each other. And the reason why I'm saying that is because al-Nusra and the Muslim Brotherhood, although they're fighting for the same cause, they are not friends. You see, there's a battle going on between the rebels right now over who's going to take over Syria when the regime is toppled. This is the same battle that's being fought in Egypt right now between the military and the Muslim Brotherhood. Now it's between al-Nusra and the Muslim Brotherhood. And you see, it's funny because all this evidence has been produced to say, all this evidence claims to have been produced to say that it was the Assad regime or it's the rebels that used it. But one piece of evidence I found in the news in Turkey, and you see, Turkey is this neutral country up there. They're very friendly to the United States. But what I found to be odd is that they just announced that they arrested 12 members of al-Nusra in southern Turkey. And normally that wouldn't be a big deal. Okay, now we know al-Nusra is in Turkey, and they're part of the rebel faction that's over in Syria, being al-Qaeda. But on these 12 members that they found in a house in Turkey, they also found 2 canisters. And in the canisters was sarin gas. Yes, sarin gas, the same sarin gas that was used in a chemical attack on the rebels. Does that make any sense? Are they fighting with each other? Are they warring with each other over who's going to take over when the Assad regime is toppled? And the other thing is, I found an article from last year, in Russia, talking about the rebels claiming that they were going to release chemical weapons and blame it on the Assad regime. Now, all of the links to all of the things that I'm talking about, I'm going to have underneath this video down here on every media format that we posted on. Whether it's on YouTube, you'll find it in the down below in the information area. Also on seedoftruth.me. If you go into our social network, we're going to be posting this up to our video section, so you'll also find an entire outline of everything that we're talking about in this video on that forum as well. And let me invite you guys, if you guys like what we're doing, come on over to seedoftruth.me and set up a profile on our social network. Receive updates. We're going to try to be doing this stuff on different subject matter, especially a lot of these things that are going on in the news, to try to decipher between all this misinformation and disinformation and all of these bits and pieces that are out there and try to put it together for you. Now, this is just the dust on the dirt to all of this stuff. There's all kinds of, if you were to start investigating this stuff, you'll find that there's all these gas deals going on right now. And Iran, this is why Iran is sending troops over to Syria. Iran just signed a deal with northern Iraq and Syria to run a gas pipeline from Iran's shared gas reserve with Qatar. And they're running all the way up through Iran, through northern Iraq, over into Syria to connect to the pipeline that's in Syria. Now, the funny thing about that is the gas is still coming out of the same reserve that Qatar belongs to, except Iran's getting paid for it, not Qatar. And I think the United States really, that doesn't sit well with the United States, seeing how we have all these sanctions on Iran. And speaking of sanctions on Iran, Iran just turned around, and they're also not just trying to get into Europe, the European market with their gas reserves. They're also trying to go the other way, and they're trying to get into China. And they obviously they're blocked by Afghanistan, but they're striking a deal with Pakistan. And they want to strike a deal with Pakistan to bring a gas pipeline, a new gas pipeline, down through Pakistan over into India and then over into China. This is also why Russia has teamed up with Iran. And this gas pipeline will be allowed by Russia, because a lot of this stuff, when what Russia's been doing is, let's say Azerbaijan signs a deal with Russia. Russia starts buying all this gas from Azerbaijan. And they say, okay, connect your gas to our pipelines. Don't connect it to the TAP pipelines. Don't connect it to Nabucco. You're going to connect your gas pipelines to our pipelines. And what Russia does is they buy up the gas, they bring it into Russia, and then they resell it to Europe as Russian gas. So by running it through their pipeline, they're able to take not necessarily control of the gas, but they're able to bring that gas into their pipelines and continue feeding it as a monopoly structure set up to deliver this gas to Europe, as opposed to it being from a separate entity that they have no control on. This is the company, state-owned company, Gazprom. Now, the United States found out about this gas deal, the pipeline deal, where Iran was striking up with Pakistan, and the United States, we put these sanctions on Iran because of their weapons of mass destruction. So then we turn around and we threaten Pakistan, one of our allies, with the same types of sanctions that we have on Iran. And what for? Because they're running gas deals? They want to run a pipeline through their country to deliver gas? And why are we going to threaten them with sanctions? Oh, because it's not our allies that are delivering the gas to them. They're saying that Pakistan is breaking these sanctions, and they want Pakistan to run this stuff only through their allies' system. They want to cut out Russian influence, Russia's dominance in that in the gas market. And let me give you a quote, okay, from when he was Senator Joe Biden, now Vice President Joe Biden. But when he was senator back in 2008, he was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. And during a 2008 U.S. Senate hearing on Russian energy, this is what Biden had to say. Now, this Biden, the Vice President of the United States, says, "We need diplomacy to forge a common strategy among energy-consuming countries in Europe, a shared effort to confront Russian dominance." What does that say to you? Because to me, it says that the Vice President was saying that there has to be an alliance of countries out there to overthrow Russian dominance in the energy fields. Isn't that what we're seeing now that Biden is Vice President of the United States? Is that not the foreign policy that we're witnessing when we're about to bomb Syria? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. I'm going to leave all of our research, all of our notes, right down below, and I encourage you, read the articles, look it up, do your own research. And just a few side notes, there's a lot of deals going on, a lot of deals, new pipelines being built, new pipelines attempting to be built. But the key right now is this Nabucco pipeline that's already built over there that Qatar wants to plug into. And they have to go through Syria. That was one of the ways that they wanted to go, and also to plug into the Pan-Arabian pipeline that was coming from the other country that they just took over because of its reserves, gas reserves, which is Egypt. Don't forget to leave comments, please. We spent a lot of time researching this, so please tell me what you think. If some of the information is just bunk, wrong, whatever your thoughts are, leave them below. And remember, please sign up, create a profile on seetetruth.me. We're hoping to get a following. A lot of this information was sent over to us from a few different people that actually follow us as well as myself and my wife spending countless hours at night researching this stuff to try to put all of these pieces together. So we hope you like it. If you do, please share this, and hopefully I'll see you on the network. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you then. Thank you.